And I'm going to also transcribe. And the other thing that we're kind of testing indirectly, depending on how many people end up being in this today, is, in the past, if you did something where there was more than a few hundred people, you would have to do it not with a time delay, like you're doing a webinar type of thing. Well, we're using the new Microsoft capabilities of Teams to be able to do a live interactive webinar that can go up to as many as 1,000 people, but we've never tested it before. But we don't think we're going to probably get all the way up there. Oh my gosh, I thought, good to see you, Michael. I saw the technical difficulties thing pop up. That's pretty cute. I like that. All right, we are going to start now. So let me go ahead and kick off because we're going to keep this to about a 20-minute quick start glimpse of Microsoft Whiteboard. I've got Hunter on from Steepmeadow, and I have Cindy on. Cindy will be helping moderate, but both Cindy and Hunter are going to help show and tell the way a whiteboard works. You guys, I'm going to share my screen as well. I'm already recording. We're going to show you my view of using whiteboard, and we'll kind of start with me cleaning up these different windows that I have here. And I'm going to start just real quickly. The number of folks in here is going to grow. I'm going to point out a couple of things. You're seeing my view of you guys right now. I'm going to actually switch over to the together mode, just FYI. When you got this option that Microsoft does where we have us all sitting together, and I'm going to put as, I don't know, I feel like it should be an outside day. So we're going to go outside. And those of us that are coming on to our cameras, we'll be out in this little amphitheater here. But again, you're mainly going to see me in a second switch to the whiteboard, talk about the features, and we'll just all come back every once in a while. And if you raise your hand, Cindy will be seeing that. You can also click on the conversation, and I'll say hello. Put your Q&A here. And we'll stop about every 3 or 4 minutes. Again, it's only going to be 20 minutes. We're going to do a quick intro to Whiteboard. So thanks everybody again. I'm going to just jump into it. So listen, Whiteboard is something, if you have an Office 365 subscription, and the way I like to kind of set the table for this a lot of times is to, and I'm going to get a new browser window up right here. When you're in Whiteboard, or one way just to understand what is this thing, where does it come from? If you go to office.com, so I just logged into office.com with my Steve Sharpless credential. This is your Office subscription. And when you get in here, if you may or may not land here because you might just be using Outlook, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, but you can log into office.com, and down the left you see things like Word, PowerPoint, Excel, OneNote, Outlook, and then Teams, of course. But if I click on this gear at the bottom, there are all these other apps. And in the past, we've talked about some of these other apps, and we'll have future topics on lists, on Planner. We need to be doing tips and tricks on Word and Excel and PowerPoint, because I saw a new tip on Word that I didn't realize it could do today. But down, as you scroll down, you're going to have this capability for Whiteboard. And when I click on Whiteboard here, this is Whiteboard in the cloud. And this is the browser version of Whiteboard. Let me try to say it more clearly. And I want to sort of start to show you that Whiteboard rears itself up in lots of different places. So there is a bunch of whiteboards, and I'm going to click into this one in a second. You can see we've been working on some sticky notes, and I'm logged in as Steve Sharpless up here into this whiteboard arena, but I'm not in the best environment yet for Whiteboard, because down in my Windows 10 environment, as I scroll down here, you can see I've got an app called Whiteboard. And when I click this app called Whiteboard and zoom back out, this is the same whiteboard. In fact, if I step back out, there's the same set of whiteboards, but I want you to notice that it's the difference of having a desktop app versus the browser version of the app. And what's interesting to me too, I'm going to go ahead and share my my iPhone here to show you what this looks like from your iPhone, because it's kind of amazing. Whiteboard, you could be participating in a meeting virtually and just be on your phone here, and you're going to see when I get logged in completely, there is a Whiteboard app. And if I click on the Whiteboard app in my phone, it's going to log me in. And because I'm logged in as Steve Sharpless, and I'm actually already in that same one, I'm going to back out and actually can turn my phone. This little sharing thing lets you see those are the same whiteboards, and I'm just on my cell phone. And so you'll see in a second if I click into the whiteboard that we're going to demo a little bit. Hunter and Cindy are right now on this same
Same
whiteboard.
one.
I'm on it with my what's that, Hunter? Is this the right one?
No, that wasn't me. I think there's just a little bit feedback from the
Okay,
mic.
gotcha. So again, the first little step here is just to say, listen, the first challenge is where is this whiteboard? How do I turn it on? And how does it interact either in a meeting or just working on a whiteboard? You don't have to be in a meeting using the whiteboard. And actually there's a fourth place that whiteboard shows up just to kind of keep the confusion factor going here for a second. I have it up right here inside of your, if you share something from a Teams meeting, so you're in a live Teams meeting, I'm going to annotate here just for a second to point out yet another place that whiteboard comes up. If you're the organizer or presenter of a Teams meeting and you click that share button, all these things pop up from the bottom. You may or may not have noticed, but when whiteboard shows up there in the future, anyone external or internal is going to see a whiteboard, and what it's going to end up looking like, just to sort of show you the cake coming out of the oven, this is the vision here where in a Teams meeting, when you share your whiteboard, here's the other people down here that are in the meeting. But again, if I just sort of annotate a little bit to kind of point out a couple of things here, and I'll pick a little red pen here. So these are the folks that are in the meeting, but you see these little icons, that's where they're touching the whiteboard. Someone could be moving a sticky note. Someone could just be using their mouse pointer, or if it's a touch screen, they could be drawing something. And you have this ability to kind of walk up to a virtual whiteboard and do it with the people live while you're in the meeting. Now, what is being used here is the whiteboard, the browser version of the whiteboard. So I want to caution you, today we're going to show some, I think they're magic tricks. I totally do. I've seen people respond like they think they're magic tricks, but the magic tricks don't all work in each version of Teams. They actually work in the iPhone version and the Android version, and they're going to work in the desktop version of Teams, excuse me, of Whiteboard. So let me pull up the whiteboard. Now let's see if I'm true, if I'm hitting any reality here on, is this really a magic trick or not? And what you see here is a couple things. I'm in the whiteboard client, and if I click on this area here, you can see that I can tell Cindy and Hunter are active, and Barry Allen and Carson are also invited to this whiteboard, but no one else can have access to this whiteboard. Right now, this isn't the whiteboard version that I'm sharing as part of the meeting, but listen, if you're presenting to a client, you could be sharing your screen like I'm doing right now, and you've got the ability with your colleagues to sort of say, hey, we're going to have let's in this case, we're kind of talking like we're preparing for a meeting. You can see that the scenario here is, hey, we're going to have a sales proposal coming up, and you can see right now these sticky notes. I'm going to move my hand away a little bit, but Hunter and Cindy are working on, we've been talking about the different ideas for the proposal. And you know what, Cindy and Hunter, I think we need to move those green ideas, the ones that we talked about in green. Can we move those up to the follow-up? In fact, I'll move one of them. Notice that one of the things you can do is you can move these notes into the follow-up area. And when you move them to the follow-up area, we can assign who or reassign who's going to follow it up. You know, it's kind of a neat concept because when you're in a real conference room and you're on a real whiteboard and you've done all these sticky notes and drawings, to think that I can grab a topic and land it on a follow-up and then be able to have those follow-ups be assigned is kind of a nice, what I would call a magic trick in terms of letting those follow-ups. And where those follow-ups go, by the way, is to your to-do. So they're going to show up as assigned to you over in this other app that some of you are familiar with. So the vision is you have a great meeting, and you can see Hunter's moving that whole thing around right there. So that we're all it's called co-authoring. We're all in this whiteboard at the same time. Now, I'm going to move the whiteboard over and show a couple of other things. I'm first of all going to go down to the bottom and I'm going to pick the eraser. I'm going to erase a couple things just to clean a couple of things up. So I've got a touch screen. You don't have to have a touch screen. I'm going to next. This is an item I just added it to the board earlier, and let me grab this and zoom in a little bit. This is when I just right clicked earlier and I went to add a picture file, and I actually just grabbed a JPEG that is this JPEG right here. This, as I make it bigger, you can see that may or may not realize that's just a photo with my iPhone of a real whiteboard in Beaumont, just talking about some different COVID emergency. What are we going to do? And that whiteboard is just a picture. Now, if I go up here, I can do a couple things. If I click on Ink Grab and Hunter or Sid, if you could help with the mute all up there on the other controls, I'm going to click on Ink Grab, and when I click on Ink Grab, if I can click on it, there we go. This is a magic trick to me. Microsoft AI is going to what's just a picture. It was a picture of a static real board, and when it finishes doing the Ink Grab thing, it's going to have converted that into ink. So now you can see as I change this whole whiteboard, it does a pretty decent job. I mean, it's trying to take that picture. And notice if I go grab my eraser down here, I can now start to interact with what used to be just a picture. And I can say, you know what? All I really wanted to do was get the part that we need to talk about, and we're going to change some things. And maybe the scenario is here. All right, really, we had this completely designed wrong. This part is not true. And so I'm going to erase that, but I'm going to try to keep the rest. So essentially, any diagram that you can import, just another quick example, like this is a JPEG of this, it wasn't a picture. This is just a photo that let's say you have a diagram from some CAD system, and as you pull that up, it's just a picture, it's just an image, but I've got the ink grab, and it's going to convert that. That's converted it now already. And I could grab my eraser and we could start changing that diagram. And again, I had this question come up earlier today. Why does this matter? Well, it depends only if you have a need to, in your interactions internally or your interactions with the customer, if it helps to look at something that you're going to be designing, sort of drawing changes like you would in a real conference room, then I think you're going to find that this is a very valuable tool. Now, let me pause there for the first time and see if there's some questions, and then I'm going to come back to this whiteboard and continue to show 6 or 8 other features and make sure that we're answering questions as well. But any questions out there, Cindy?
No, it doesn't look like.
Steven, quick question.
Yeah.
In a whiteboard, you're able to change, you go in and you change that little image. Now you were able to erase portion. Can you, all of these arrows had a bunch of text. Can you go and replace the text and say, this is what it should be opposed to what it was in that converted image?
Yeah, you could. I mean, when you convert the image, it's going to convert whatever text was there into ink. And that may not, that you may wish you still had the text there, but you could come in and start correcting that, putting in text. Because when I go back to the whiteboard here, I'll show you what I'm talking about. Like if I come back to this image, these things right here are ink right now. So I can't really retype them, but I could just erase it. And then I could come down and turn this off. And instead I could put in some text right here, and I could say compressor.
Yeah, that's what I meant. That's exactly what I meant.
And when you end up doing that, notice you can take these things and pick them together, and they become one if you want them to. You can grab these two together and combine the objects so that they end up being one object, kind of combining the two. And you can also annotate right on top of there. If you don't convert it, you can actually see now it's turned into another thing where it could convert to ink again. Or actually, this is called ink beautification. When you go back to something that's inked, it'll try to even correct it a little bit. You see it kind of softened and fixed those lines and sharpened those lines a little bit. But I'm glad you asked that question, because it's a little bit of a learning process, because when you ink something, you don't have the text there anymore. You're going to just be with ink, but you could now go put some text on top of there. Any other questions?
I don't see any questions right now, Steve.
All right. Do y'all have any questions? Y'all can speak up as well. Yeah, there's someone raising their hand there. Let's see.
Oh,
Hey, Steve, this is Drew.
Hey, Drew.
Hey, appreciate you doing this. Something that would be helpful. I know you were going through those different ways under which you get to whiteboard. I've also noticed that through those different doorways, the features are different. Do you know if there's anywhere that either documents or lists that? Because that's what creates a lot of confusion on what you can and can't do, because you can't keep up with, like, okay, which doorway did I go through? Am I in Teams when I launched it, or did I do it in the app? Or
Yeah.
and with our group of instructors, that's what's making it hard to kind of know how to adapt whiteboard for teaching moments, because you don't have full functionality in certain situations.
Yeah, there's just two versions of whiteboard, first of all. And I'll tell you about there's the browser version, which is what Teams is using in a Teams meeting.
Okay.
If you share the whiteboard. But if you do what I'm doing now, which is you don't share the whiteboard, you share your screen and you run whiteboard, you're using either the thick client version in
Gotcha.
Windows. Actually, the iPhone and the Android have all the features, even the preview features. I can't believe it, but the phones both have all the features. I will say Hunter is on a Mac, and it only has the whiteboard version of Whiteboard on a Mac. They don't have a desktop version. But I actually have Hunter running a Windows VM so that from his Mac in Austin, he could be using and see all the other features. Because the other good point that you're making, Drew, is when we look at this whiteboard that I have up right here, these things like this sort of this template, it's a template right here, the one that we have up. If you could go look at this same whiteboard in the browser, you won't even see that. It's just like the whiteboard version of browsers. Like, I don't know what that is because I don't know how to do that yet because I'm just the browser version. Um, the doorways that you go into, it's just make sure you're clicking on a Windows 10 app version of it, the thick client, and not the browser version, which you're going to get to either when you share the Teams one, or if you go from a Mac, that browser version. But in terms of answering the question, do they make it very clear? No, it's changes on a minute by minute basis. If I come back in here and come down on this plus sign, part of the point that guys that Drew's helping me make, you can see some of these say preview, 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 and we're using the templates. In fact, I wanted to show you some more of the templates. Let me zoom back out, and we're using a template right here. I'm going to move this whiteboard over just to get some new canvas space. And by the way, if you're new to whiteboard, it kind of goes infinitely in the X and the Y direction. And if I now come into these templates, again, they don't exist today in the browser version, but you see all of these templates. The vision is neat. Like, let's say you're going to do strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Just clicking on that and then resizing my screen here, you get the automatically populated set of these sticky notes with the right goal area over here, and then you can start to just move those stickies in and out, right? So it's a starting point. It makes it easier for you to say on a whim, hey, let's have an SWOT session. And that ability to put this template up there, you might just, with the Windows 10 client, you may just want to play around and come into the templates and just look at all of the different ones that they have in here. There's quite a few of them. Any other questions? And I'm going to go over a couple more features. We're going to go about 3 more minutes. This is just the beginning. We're doing these going from once a month to twice a month, and you're going to see multiple speakers starting to do these things. We're just seeing a tremendous sort of interest at, hey, someone needs to give us pull the flashlight out, show us what the features are. And actually, in the spirit of a flashlight here, I want to show some other features by clicking over here and just pointing out kind of feature by feature. I'll just do a little bit of just an explanation. Ink to shape, real fast on ink to shape. If I come in and draw myself, and I'm going to zoom back out so I don't mess this up too badly. If I click on my draw button again, and I have a touch screen, but if I'm going to draw a circle right here, it's not a circle, but it's an oval. It's basically taking and helping me draw shapes, and I'm still having trouble even drawing a square. Come on, Steve, you can do it. There it goes. So if you come, I draw such poor squares that it's not even, Microsoft isn't even realizing, wait, it's trying to draw a circle. But that's what the theory is behind the ink to shape. You've got a lot of abilities to snap objects on this grid. You can actually lock an object on the grid. It's like if I come back over here and turn my pen off and come back over here to, let's say, this diagram, and we want to annotate on top of this. So first of all, that is one neat thing you can do, is annotate on top of a JPEG or a PDF. So I could come down and have the pen on, and then right on top of this thing, then I've got the ability to annotate on it. And then when I stop annotating, that's traveling now with the object. So that's a nice thing to have. And you can end up locking this down when you have, let's say, this object here. The lock thing says it's now locked, and no matter what, I can't drag it off of there. So because ultimately these things, when you're dragging and dropping and everyone's touching them, what ends up happening is a little bit of confusion on what you're trying to keep moving and what's not moving. So you've got that ability to lock or not lock items. You can post these things to Teams. So again, there's this other interplay. Like I could post a message to Teams that would show that we're working on this. It would have the link, and on a Teams channel, someone could click that link and it's going to take them back to this particular Teams whiteboard. Let me see if there's one last thing that I haven't hit. Oh yeah, I want to show you adding in a PDF, which is not a preview feature, but let's say I was going to add, we're going to work and prepare on our presentation, and maybe this PDF, I'm going to open it, and you can see Hunter's working in the background. You see the way they do PDFs and PowerPoints. You may not want the whole deck. You're not going to flip through the deck. If you're going to present the deck as, it was either a PDF viewer or with PowerPoint, you'll use that. But let's say you want to get creative, and let's say, Hunter, we're thinking about, I'm going to pick a couple of these slides that are PDF slides, and I can pick just the ones that I want and insert them. And then when I do it in that fashion, I've got those slides up here now, and we can decide to maybe this is even with our customer. We're going to want to maybe sit down here and then have the customer sit and interact with us. And maybe we want a way to interact with this a little bit differently. So we decide that we're just going to present this slide as part of the canvas. And maybe we have a sticky note, that we're going to have right here next to us. And we're going to be listening to the customer's, feedback or our internal team feedback. And, Hunter's adding something on top of there. It just gives you a different way to present. And I think that's the thing that resonates with me so much, is that in this pandemic, and we've spent so much time doing the following, as the line goes, we're just staring at each other. And even though it's kind of fun that I'm staring at you guys all sitting up in an amphitheater, that's what I think is important about the main thing about Whiteboard. It gives you a different way to potentially have even the other people interacting. The disclaimer that I'll give as we end off on the interaction: today, Whiteboard only works within your organization in terms of touching it and using it. I can share Whiteboard that I'm doing in front of my client who's external, and they can see it like you're seeing it right now. But ultimately, when we come down into, if I shared the Whiteboard from Teams, and you're in a meeting with me, it's a big mistake to share it. You're going to get this message right there that says, hey, this still doesn't work externally.
No calcium.
Let me see if there's any questions, and we're going to end at the 23-minute clip. Any questions or comments? And we appreciate you guys jumping in. Yeah, that looks like there's at least one hand raised. Is there a question out there? Yes, Michael.
Yes, thank you, Stephen. So I've been trying to do some testing with it, and I love that you're doing kind of a forced perspective by sharing the Teams window or the Whiteboard window, because that's one thing that we've been dealing with. Do you know if there's a way to template a whiteboard that you wanted to always have the same starting point for, say, multiple sessions, to where you could have one default template and then duplicate that to be used for each class to kind of make their annotations with and work together on? And then the next class, copy the original one and start from scratch again? Or would you always have to recreate a whiteboard for each individual session?
I believe what you'd be doing is duplicating a whiteboard, which I do believe you can do. I won't try it right now, but I'll take that as a parking lot option. And Hunter, drag one of those sticky notes into our parking lot. We'll go look into that, and feel free to reach out on us, and we'll get you an answer back on that. I see across the board, Microsoft is working on templates in Teams and workspaces. When you build a new channel, they didn't have that there 6 or 8 months ago. There is a huge initiative on templatizing everything imaginable. So the templates that we see right there that they have canned templates, that would be typically I'm expecting that they would give us from an admin perspective or a team owner perspective or a whiteboard owner perspective. That should be where we can upload our own templates, but I'm obviously just guessing on that and speculating on that part.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Great. How about Evie?
Oh, hi. So my question is regarding, can you add notes to PowerPoint presentations, use Whiteboard as a way that people can collaborate together in decks?
Yeah, so your good point is that, listen, I was kind of purporting that whiteboard's a great way to annotate, but there's other ways to annotate. And from a PowerPoint perspective, a couple things I would show on PowerPoint, like if I just go open up a quick PowerPoint here, under, let's see, I've got one right here. It's my Steepmeadow one here. And I'm just opening it up so you guys see me. I'm not sharing it through the screen. And I'm going to show one thing first that I think a lot of people know about, but just to make sure we're all on the level set, like I'm in PowerPoint and I'm presenting mode. And when I do that now, over on the left, sometimes people don't realize, oops, I clicked and I shouldn't have clicked. Yeah, I got it. Thank you, Microsoft AI. And I'm going to come down here and pick one of these highlighters. I'm going to pick that one right there. And I think I've got a red highlighter now. So I've got the ability to annotate on a slide and then kind of come back and forth, and that annotation is still on top of there. And when I even leave this slide from a presenter, it lets me store those or not store those. But I think a lot of people do know about that, and that may not be exactly what you're asking about, but I want to show you a futures thing as well. So let me show you this one quick deck slide. It's showing some neat things that Microsoft is doing that are just around the corner. I get an updated deck from Microsoft once a month on basically new features in Teams, and I went to the wrong deck. This one right here is fairly recent, and there's a vision about presenting. This thing right here called presenter mode, if you were annotating on that with what I just showed you, you'll be able to do that. So they're watching, and now you get you as a cutout, so that right now y'all only, where do you see me? I'm like a tiny little box. But in the future, very quick future soon, as a presenter of this PowerPoint, I can project how I want to be in front or next to it. And then what I'm seeing on the backside, in the presenting side, is I get to see my meeting notes of that. I mean, my slide notes, the next slide's coming down, and I have the ability in here to click on that annotation. It's one of these buttons right here. I could be annotating here, but I'm also getting to see people's faces. So there's a lot of things that are still catching up because the virtual world caught us where this doesn't feel like being in a conference room with a whiteboard behind me and I can see you. And those little things are being quickly gap closed by Microsoft. Evie, I don't know if that answered your question. I just took a quick first pass at that.
I actually, it was very helpful. Actually, I really enjoyed. My question was more directed towards if a whiteboard presents a certain way to kind of personalize some type of presentation or kind of turn into an animation. So then people can see the progress of the whiteboard or something kind of like, for example, in the Apple, there's the software called Procreate. And if you do a drawing in Procreate, there's a way to kind of, if you click a button, it shows history. I don't remember exactly the comment, but it shows from the beginning how the drawing was made. So I was thinking if they had that kind of interesting feature in a whiteboard, so you could, for example, can you create animations from what was put into the whiteboard, and how would that be integrated with PowerPoint?
Yeah, that's not there yet. And they have other things where they do, there's a way to animate a little bit in PowerPoint. But if you grabbed a PowerPoint slide right now and you're throwing, it's like you're pasting it onto a whiteboard and then you can annotate on it. But there's not yet that. Now, listen, we saw that there's this thing called ink beautification. They're going to push AI into this however and how fast as they can. Anything that they can do. I don't have it ready here, but I think part of what we'll post on the follow-up, and we'll send an email to follow-up that has a link to the YouTube of this. two quick statements on that front. I want to point you to Microsoft does a good job on their roadmap. There's a public facing roadmap that if you just put in Whiteboard, it'll show you the 30 backlog items that they're working on. So that you're not guessing. And that's one thing. They announced one yesterday going live. Right now, when you go to Whiteboard, and I didn't make this point earlier, and if I back out of this Whiteboard, you have to come into Whiteboard to see where are the whiteboards. They're not down in OneDrive and SharePoint, but they're about to be. And that's when they're also going to be shareable externally, because just like you right click and share a Word document and you can pick parameters about sharing and view or edit, a whiteboard is going to become a first-class citizen document that's just sitting there in your file system. And that's happening within the next 4 to 6 weeks.
Nice. Thank you.
Great.
Well, listen, I'll let everyone go. Thanks so much. We'll announce the next one of these. Thanks for being patient with we're going to move to this new webinar, even registration system that is part of Teams. Up until now, we've been either sending out LinkedIn announcements or putting in meeting requests into your calendar, but we're going to improve on that soon. So thanks again, everyone, for jumping in, and have a great rest of your Thursday.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
so much, Stephen.
Yeah, thank
Thank
Very
you.
helpful.
Good to see you. Yeah, thanks.
Great.